It was just past dawn when the patrol car rolled into the narrow alley, hugging the old brick tenements. A thin strip of sunlight streaked across the cracked pavement, illuminating the peeling paint on weathered doors and the huddle of makeshift shacks squeezed between abandoned warehouses. Inside one of those shacks, a small silhouette sat curled on a ragged mattress, knees drawn to a bony chest. The boy's ribs pressed sharply against the thin fabric of his shirt, and his eyes, wide with fear, darted toward the approaching figures, in uniform. He had gone without breakfast for 2 days, stealing scraps from a neighbor's trash bin, surviving on the faint hope that his mother might come back. The echo of footsteps rattled his heart as he leaned toward a battered wooden trapdoor set into the floorboards near the corner. Beneath that hatch lay the secret he had guarded with trembling resolve. 30 feet from the shack's entrance, 2 officers stepped out of their cruiser. Their boots crunched over broken glass and litter, each echo blending with the distant hum of a waking city. Officer Martinez, a tall man with a face hardened by years on the streets, flicked on his flashlight and jutted his chin toward the door. Inside, 25-year-old Henry, his partner, moved with caution. Through a grimy window they glimpsed the boy, no older than 10, hunched and clutching a threadbare blanket. Martinez rapped on the door with measured force. The boy froze, adrenaline flickering through his thin frame. He managed to press his free hand against the floorboards, fingertips brushing the edge of the hatch as if to anchor himself to something real. The door swung open on cracked hinges, revealing scattered crates and empty tin cans, the faint scent of mold hanging in the air. Dust motes floated like ghosts in the morning light. Martinez's gaze scanned the room, landing on the hatch. His boot shifted closer, ready to lift the door. The boy rose slowly, a tremor in his shoulder, and raised both arms, voice trembling as he called out, "My brother is there." His cry pierced the silence, a jagged shard of desperation cutting through the officer's measured calm. Henry hesitated, pistol still holstered but ready, confusion rippling across his features as Martinez's hand clamped onto the hatch's battered ring pull. For a moment the world seemed to pause. The boy's eyes brimmed with tears, his thin neck craning as he stared at the officers, pleading silently with every fiber of his body. Henry exchanged a glance with Martinez, who nodded grimly. Slowly, Martinez lifted the trap door. The board creaked like a dying creature, revealing a dark cavity beneath. The air that escaped was cold and stale, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of something unspoken. Henry swept his flashlight into the gloom, the beam trembling as it revealed a low-ceilinged crawl space cluttered with empty boxes and frayed blankets. And there, huddled in the corner, was a shape so still it could have been a carved statue. As the light settled, the officers realized what lay before them. The figure under the sparse bedding was not a simple sibling in need of safety. The skin was pale, almost translucent in the harsh beam, stretched thin over angular bones. The body shivered in a convulsive spasm as the flashlight's glare found it. Dark rings crusted under the eyes, and lips, cracked with thirst, parted to reveal a mouth that whimpered rather than breathed. Martinez cursed under his breath. Henry moved forward, kneeling at the hatch's edge. "Is he alive?" he asked softly, his training warring with the shock in his voice. The boy, teetering on the threshold, nodded slowly. "Please help him," he whispered, voice ragged like a threadbare cloth. The officers exchanged another glance. Martinez barked into his radio, summoning backup and medical. Henry knelt, reaching down as far as he dared into the tight space. His fingertips brushed the boy's brother's shoulder through the thin wool of a second blanket. The contact jolted him. The boy's brother was alive, barely, but alive. The child's 19-year-old brother, named Daniel, had been missing for 3 days, stolen or lost to the street's dark currents. Rumors among locals whispered of traffickers moving children through hidden tunnels that ran beneath the city's oldest districts. Henry's jaw tightened as he realized the full horror of the boy's revelation. Martinez pried the rest of the hatch open, toppling the door onto the floor with a dull thud that seemed to echo in the cramped space. Daniel's breathing was shallow and uneven, each inhalation sounding like a small gasp of defeat. Henry eased himself into the crawl space, the wooden boards jutting into his knees. He gently laid a hand on Daniel's shoulder. The youth's head lolled sideways, and he blinked once before his eyelids fluttered in recognition. "Danny?" he croaked. The voice was a thin thread, as if even speaking had drained him of strength. His eyes, once bright and curious, now glistened with fear and confusion. He attempted to rise, but a spasm of pain folded him back onto the dusty floor. Henry pressed a hand to his back, murmuring, "Easy, man. We're the good guys. We're here to help." Daniel's gaze flicked toward the hatch above him. The faintest tremor of hope flickered across his face as he whispered, "I thought no one would ever find me." Outside, Martinez held the young boy tightly, shielding him from the harsh scene unfolding below. The boy's tears had dried, running tracks down his dusty cheeks, leaving smudges of dirt upon skin already worn thin by hardship. He leaned forward, eyes locked on his brother's frail form. The officers allowed the boy to kneel at the edge, and Daniel summoned enough strength to prop himself onto one elbow. His gaze met the boy's, and for a moment, the world spun as though suspended between two beats of a clock. The returned brother's silhouette mirrored the younger's, both thin with hunger and clad in clothing several sizes too small. They reached for each other's hands, fingertips brushing in a gentle, trembling grasp. The boy's voice trembled. "I thought I lost you." Henry unfastened the waist of his duty belt and produced a thermal blanket from his kit. He gently draped it over Daniel's shoulders, then motioned to Martinez. Medical personnel had arrived, but the narrow crawl space forced the paramedics to crouch precariously as they evaluated Daniel's condition. They checked for vitals. Warm blankets pressed against Daniel's limbs. The officers stepped back, allowing space for the professionals to work. As Daniel was lifted from the pit, eyes closed in relief and exhaustion, the boy followed, arms wrapping around his brother's torso. Martinez guided them both to the open doorway where morning light bathed their faces, turning tears and dirt to radiant tears of relief. The paramedics wheeled Daniel onto a stretcher, their faces etched with masked concern. He was conscious, but at risk of severe dehydration and malnutrition. A medic murmured, "He's lucky to be alive. If they hadn't found him now, he might not have made it through the next night." The boy, arms still wrapped around his own inadequate blanket, trembled. Henry knelt beside him. "You did good, kid. You did right." The boy nodded, voice barely a whisper as he glanced at the paramedics adjusting an IV bag. "They left me here to die," he said, tears spilling anew. Henry's face hardened. "We'll get to the bottom of who did this." As the ambulance doors hissed shut, the officers turned their attention to the room above the hatch. The shack's single window framed a landscape of broken dreams, torn curtains hanging like shreds of memory, an empty photograph frame on the wall, and a single, worn-out sneaker resting atop a broken stool. A thin beam of light illuminated thick cracks in the floor, leading dangerously toward the hatch. Martinez swept his flashlight across the walls, discovering faint chalk marks scrawled beside the hatch, crude numbers and arrows pointing downwards. It appeared someone had mapped the subterranean space, hinting at this hideout's existence as a deliberate trap. The boy's mother, long gone and unburied, had left only memories and whispered warnings about traffickers luring children from the streets. Neighbors muttered that her husband had vanished years ago in similar fashion. The shack had been their only refuge, built from discarded planks and corrugated metal, held together by hope more than nails. Who had found it now and turned it into a prison? The officers photographed the hatch and surrounding floor for evidence. Martinez called for a K-9 unit to sweep for scents, hoping to track anyone who had visited recently. Henry traced a finger over the chalk marks, taking pictures as Martinez spoke into his handheld. "Be on the lookout for a man named Garlic. Local informants say he runs child labor rings through these old buildings." The boy leaned against the wall, knees drawn up to his chest. His brother's rescue had come at a terrible cost. The slim realization that their home had been violated by cruel strangers. He pressed his cheek to the cold brick, remembering how Daniel used to tuck him in at night, humming lullabies scraped from old nursery rhymes. He felt a flicker of guilt stir within him. If he had not begged the officers to look beneath the hatch, Daniel might not have survived. A sudden shadow fell across the doorway, Detective Singh, older and gray-haired, arrived with evidence techs in tow. He nodded at Martinez, surveying the scene with practiced eyes. We've got possible fingerprints on the hatch handle and trafficking paraphernalia in the crawl space. There's also a small stash of stolen electronics hidden under a loose floorboard. His words fell like cold rain, promising a deeper web of crime. The boy's gaze drifted back to the hatch's open maw, now glowing with the harsh glare of portable lights. He asked in a small voice, "Will they catch whoever did this?" Detective Singh knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "We'll do everything we can. You and your brother saved each other, and that gives us a strong lead." The boy nodded, eyes fixed on the hatch as though peering into the abyss. Future fears mingled with present relief. Would he ever see that dimly lit space again? Could he ever sleep without dreaming of that open trapdoor? For now he held on to one truth: his brother was alive. By midday, crime scene technicians had gathered what evidence they could from the shack. They sealed the hatch with plastic markers and detailed notes. The boy and his brother were taken to a local shelter, where a social worker named Maria offered them hot soup and warm blankets. The taste of broth warmed the siblings from the inside out, a small comfort after days of scavenging for scraps. Daniel's eyes drifted closed as he sipped slowly, nurse's fingers checking his IV drip. His ribs rose and fell unevenly, but his breathing was stable. The boy folded his hands on the table, watching his brother rest, gratitude and relief shining in his expression. Maria knelt beside them, voice gentle as she offered both boys clothing that fit. The feel of a clean shirt against their skin was tinged with shock and gratitude. "You're safe now," she said, smoothing the boy's hair. He nodded and turned to gaze at Daniel. The older boy's head lolled slowly, exhaustion etched in every line of his drawn face. "I thought I was strong enough to survive," Daniel whispered. "For both of us." The boy shook his head firmly. "We're stronger together." Maria pulled out a phone and scrolled through contacts. She explained that an investigator from Child Protective Services would need to talk to them, to piece together the chain of events that led to Daniel's disappearance. The boy swallowed hard. "I told them what happened," he said. "The chalk marks, the hatch." Maria nodded. "You did exactly the right thing." Late afternoon light filtered through the shelter's high windows as the investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Carter, sat with the brothers. She wore a badge that reflected her years in the field. "We'll move you both to a safe home," she explained. "A foster family that's been vetted. You'll go together." The boy's eyes filled with both hope and dread. He clung to his brother's hand as though it were a lifeline. Carter's pen scratched across her notepad as Daniel recounted the days he spent trapped. He had awakened in darkness, hands bound at his wrists by rough rope. The captors forced him to prostitute himself to strangers who paid with cases of electronics and promise-laced words. Daniel's voice faltered as he remembered the warmth of a stranger's breath, the feel of cold bills slipping into his hand, and the whispered threats that accompanied each transaction. The boy listened silently, tears slipping down his cheeks. He had known his brother was in danger, but had imagined he was hiding somewhere safe. He had thought that by keeping the hatch closed he was protecting Daniel from the worst of it. Now he realized how naive that hope had been. Carter closed her notebook and placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did everything you could," she said. "You saved him. We'll make sure those responsible face justice." The boy nodded. Though his heart still quivered like a captive bird, Daniel squeezed his hand, offering what little reassurance he could muster. Night fell by the time they settled into their new foster home. A small suburban house, painted pale blue with white trim, felt as foreign as another planet compared to the shack. The foster parents, a kindly couple named Susan and Eric, welcomed them with steaming plates of pasta and a small stack of books with colorful covers. Daniel managed a weak smile as he ate, his bones still trembling from days of neglect. The boy glanced at the window where a crescent moon hung low against a velvety sky. The world outside felt vast and uncertain, but here inside, a fragile cocoon of safety held them both. Susan draped an arm around the boy's shoulder and asked gently, Would you like to pick a book to read before bed? He nodded. Together, they chose a story about two brothers who build a treehouse, a tale so ordinary it hurt to believe it could ever be his reality. In the days that followed, the police made an arrest. Two men, discovered by a street informant to frequent the abandoned warehouses, were charged with child trafficking. The chalk marks led to a network of secret passages beneath the city's oldest blocks, where traffickers moved children like merchandise between buyers. Martinez, Henry, and Detective Singh watched as the defendants were led into custody, their faces haggard masks of guilt. The boy and his brother were present for identification, eyes trained on the men who had almost broken their lives. Daniel trembled but stood tall beside his brother. His gaze was steady as he pointed at one of the traffickers, the ringleader, the man who had torn him from the world he knew. Weeks turned to months and the brothers began to heal. Daniel gained weight, his skin filling out and regaining color. He enrolled in night classes at a local community college, determined to build a future unmarred by the nightmare he endured. The boy, now called Sam by the foster parents, enrolled in middle school for the first time. Each morning he laced up, borrowed sneakers, and boarded a rusty yellow bus that rumbled through streets once foreign to him. At night, he and Daniel shared a small bedroom lined with posters of superheroes, characters who, like them, had faced darkness and emerged stronger. Yet memories lingered beneath the surface, haunting their sleep. The hatch remained locked, in the old shack, evidence sealed away by the crime scene team. Occasionally, Sam would lie awake in bed, imagining a pair of small hands reaching from darkness, longing for rescue. He would close his eyes tight and think of Daniel's steady hand in his promising safety. Daniel, for his part, found solace in routine. Work at a local hardware store, classes, and evenings spent teaching Sam to repair bicycles. Each spark of connection stitched another thread into their wounded hearts. On the day of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Reporters crowded the benches, hungry for headlines. Dan entered the courtroom with a cane, a scar faintly visible along his forearm where he had carved initials into a metal beam to remind himself of who he was. Sam followed, tiny at 18, arms tremulous with nervous energy. Martinez and Henry sat in the gallery, their uniforms crisp and computer tablets open with evidence. Detective Singh took his place at the prosecutor's table, gravity etched into his posture. The air crackled with tension as witnesses recounted the horrors discovered beneath the city's surface. The wooden beams propped against damp walls, the layers of dust that had gone undisturbed for years. One by one, survivors and officers testified. The judge's gavel fell like thunder when the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. The traffickers, faces downward, were led away to be sentenced. The brothers nodded in unison as the judge ordered the maximum penalty. Outside the courthouse, Sobel Park provided a green respite from the gray facades of justice. Daniel and Sam sat on a bench beneath a blossoming magnolia tree, sunlight filtering through pale petals. Sam released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "They won't hurt anyone else," he whispered. Daniel placed an arm around him. "You saved me," he said. "Now we can begin living." Over the next year, the brothers flourished. Daniel graduated with a degree in social work, driven by a mission to help other children lost in trafficking rings. He founded a small nonprofit that partnered with local shelters and law enforcement to identify and rescue at-risk youth. Sam excelled academically, tutoring younger students in math during weekends. When summer arrived, they volunteered together at a recreation center downtown, teaching kids how to jump rope and draw chalk art on faded sidewalks. Their laughter echoed through the neighborhood, a sound both tender and defiant in the face of past darkness. Late one spring evening, they returned to the shack, now sealed and boarded up. The hollow shell stood silent against the orange glow of sunset. Daniel knelt beside the hatch's sealed outline. He traced a finger along the outline where the wood had once creaked open. Sam stood behind him, arms crossed over his chest as he remembered how tiny magnets once held his brother's drawings on a refrigerator door years ago. They had lost so much in that place, but it no longer held power over them. Daniel placed a smooth stone over the hatch's outline, a marker, of closure. Sam laid a second stone beside it. Together they whispered a simple vow. Never forget, but never look back. As dusk settled, they walked away hand in hand. The city hum resonated around them, alive with possibility. Somewhere ahead, children played tag beneath sprinkler sprays and laughter rose up toward the sky. Sam turned to Daniel and smiled, bright and unguarded. "We'll make sure no other kid disappears," he said. Daniel squeezed his hand. "Together," he replied. Their shadows stretched long behind them, two brothers bound by shared pain and unwavering love stepping into the promise of tomorrow.